Hi, my name's Ash, and in this video we're going to create a solution and with that some environment variables as well. To be honest, solutions were one thing that I shied away from when I started building Power Automate flows and Power Apps because I just didn't really understand the purpose of them. But now that I do, I think everyone should be using them, and in our daily jobs we are using them every day to create our processes for our clients. So they provide a structured way to manage and maintain and deploy projects, and especially when you're moving things between dev, test, and production. It allows consistency in builds, it allows easy management, and it simplifies working with other developers. So you're no longer having to share ownership of flows and things like that. They're all in solutions. So as you can see here on my screen, I've got a development leave management list. So what I'm going to do is navigate to Power Apps, and on the left hand side you'll see solutions. So first thing is we're going to create a solution, which is going to be our package basically. So I'll select new solution, and this is for a leave management system. So the display name can be leave management. Oh, it's already popped up for me there. So leave management solution, and we'll select a publisher. So this is really important to select one that identifies who's creating it or who's developing it. I wouldn't suggest using the default publisher, so I'd recommend creating a new one. So I'm going to use my Get Splash one here, and I'll select create. So there we go. My solution's created in my sandbox environment. And now what I want to do is build my flows for my leave management solution. Now typically if I was going through make.powerautomate.com, I would go my flows, create flow. But through this solution, I'm going to create some environment variable first. An environment variable is something that allows you to remove hard-coded values from your flows and your apps and use values that may be relevant to, say, a sandbox area versus a production area, or say an team email is likely to change in the future. You could use a text environment variable in your send email action rather than hard coding an email, which means when you need to update that, you just need to come and update the environment variable rather than going into the flow and updating it here. So to create an environment variable, first I'm going to create one for my data source. So I need to connect it to SharePoint. So I'm going to go new, more, an environment variable, and I'm going to call this SharePoint site leave management data source connection. Now I know that may seem really long, and we do have different types of naming conventions depending on the client that we're working with, but the really main important thing is to use something that is widely known by everyone who's creating flows and solutions in that environment or that organization, because as you build a lot more flows, the list of environment variables grows, and it makes it really hard to actually find the one that you're looking for. So just make sure that the display name is really relevant to what this environment variable is. So you can also add a description. So what you could say in here is this is the data source connection to my SharePoint site. And some people also, just picks up my spelling, also add the actual dev and production things in their description here. So they could put the actual URLs in the description so that when you're doing a deployment from, say, sandbox to production, it makes it really easy. So the data type, I'm going to select data source, and then I'm going to select SharePoint because I want to connect to SharePoint. I want to use my connection, so in a development area, it's fine to use your own connection. When I'm deploying it to production, I'd like to use probably a service account or a service principal account so that it's not connected to an individual user. And then this one's going to be the site. So to set up a connection to a list, you'd have to do the site first. So here's the site, and I'm going to go and find my list, my site, which is the Splashpoint one here, and push save. And once that's done, I'm going to create my list environment variable. So I'm going to name this list leave management data source. The reason I add data source or connection or something like that in here is because sometimes when you're creating flows, you actually have to use like the internal name or the display name of a SharePoint list, which would actually be a text environment variable. So in this one, it's going to be a data source connection, but sometimes you do need to use text to use the display name or the internal name of a list. So then I'm going to select my SharePoint site one that I've just created, and then that will bring up your list that you have in that site, and we can see my leave management dev one. And I'll push save. So now that I've got my environment variables, I can go and create a flow. So I'm going to go new and automation. I want a cloud flow, and if you've been watching my videos, I do love my instant flows to start development, so I'm just going to set up an instant one here. And my name for the flow is going to be the number one in the process, and this is going to be leave management approval. So this is going to be my approval flow. Manually trigger a flow. Cool. So the next step that I might do here is get item. So obviously it's going to be for a SharePoint item, and I want to show you how to use the environment variables. So when I drop down here, you'll see that the hard-coded values show straight away. And this is what I would refer to as a hard-coded value, because when you select this and say I moved my solution to another environment, it would still hold that value. So what we want to do is select the environment variable. So I'm going to go enter custom value, and then you can see straight away when I select in the site address, on the dynamic content you can see that my environment variables pop up. So we should be able to find that one that I've just created, which I can see here. So my SharePoint site leave management, and there's my SharePoint site. And then the same things for lists. So you can see that the hard-coded ones pop up, but we want to enter a custom value, and I will find my leave management list. So there we go there. And so those two are our environment variables. So now when I move it to another environment or another tenant, all I need to do is say this is the SharePoint site and this is the list in my environment variables, rather than coming in and changing everything within the flow. So I'm just going to add an ID in here, which we'll be able to put into my get item. So I'll push save, and that's it. So then I would then continue. I would create all my flows, and everything that I would normally hard code, so emails or data source connections, I would try and create as environment variables as I go along. You can also add existing flows into a solution. So say you've got some flows that are sitting in Power Automate, but then you now want to move them into solutions so that they're part of proper application lifecycle management and everything. You can select add existing, and I'm not actually sure what I have in here, but we'll just have a look. So cloud flow, and we'll go outside. So I've got a heartbeat flow. So what that would look like if I selected that and added that. That's now part of my solution. So now when I move this solution from one environment to another or one tenant to another, this flow is now part of that package that is going. And then I can click into it, and what you can actually do is see if it needs any environment variables, and then we could create some if it does. So if I go into edit, cool. So this one doesn't actually need any environment variables, but say I did need to change this to an environment variable. So I'll copy that, and what I could do is go back, and then I'm going to create an environment variable, and this is going to be text, and I'll just paste that so that that's what we're talking about, and this is going to be a text one. So default value, what that means is if I pasted the activity text here, that means when I release it to, say, another environment or another tenant, it would use that value as my environment variable. But most of the time that changes, so I stay away from using that, and I'll put that in there. So that means in this environment, this is going to use activity text as the text environment. So I'll add that into my solution, and then I'll go back into my flow and I can replace that text with an environment variable. So the more you do, the more you'll understand what is valuable as an environment variable. Sometimes it does make sense to use text in different places or things like that. So it just comes with building flows and learning more about them. Now this environment variable is actually for the whole environment. So once I create my SharePoint site in here, that means that I can use it in any solution. So just be careful with that, because if you are using it in multiple solutions, that means that if it changed in one solution, it's going to change for the environment, not just that solution. So it is a good idea to keep track of all the environment variables that you're creating and what they connect to, so that everyone is across what is being created in the environment. So if I just went into this holiday planner one here, what I could do is actually add that environment variable as well. So I can go and, oh, sorry, that was new. Add existing environment variable, and then you'll see that I can add the ones that I've just created, the list and the SharePoint sub. So when you do have lots of developers, it's quite handy to keep a list of everything that's in your environment so that people are aware of what they're using and where, and that you're not duplicating things as well. So solutions are a really good way to package up flows and apps and things for a process and move them between different environments and tenants. Everything that we do now as a team, we use solutions, and it means that if we all have the right permissions, we can all see everything within the solution as well, which makes it really easy for developing things together. This is a really quick video on how to create a solution and some environment variables and connect it to a flow. Trying to aim at a more beginner level on creating solutions at the start. So if you have any questions, just let me know, and thanks for watching.